Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what time you're viewing this podcast. We're in the 20-something, I've lost track now, podcast series that we call Race, Culture, and the Church. Race, Culture, and the Church. And we're trying to hit that sweet spot, that intersection. Again, think of it as a Venn diagram. You got race, you've got culture, and you've got church. And somewhere in between is where we'd like to center this conversation. And I am pleased. I always say that. I'm very pleased. But today I'm very, very pleased that we have doctors, Mark Henderson and Helen Chew. Thank you so much for entering into this space. I know you're extremely busy, but thank you.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure.
It's pleasure is ours. As I like to, I tease but don't, our Cracker Jack research group, that would be me, has done extensive research, but we've scraped a few things off the internet. So by way of introduction, I'll just start with Mark. It says, so if there's anything wrong here, you can blame UC Davis. But Mark has a strong background in general internal medicine as a clinician, educator, and administrator, and as a reviewer of the Journal of General Internal Medicine and Journal of American Medical Association. His research is focused on medical education, including students, career choices, and the use of systematic reviews and clinical education. He is UC Davis School of Medicine Associate Dean for Admissions and Outreach and Vice Chair and Residency Program Director for the Department of Internal Medicine.
Sounds good.
Oh, sounds great. So it's all true, right?
Pretty much.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I don't say the names have been changed to protect the innocent, but that's quite a bit. What's quite a bit more? Dr. Helen Chew is the leader of the UC Davis Cancer Center Clinical Breast Cancer Program. She is responsible for coordinating surgical, medical, and radiation oncology services and clinical trials for breast cancer. Dr. Chew's research interests involve novel, new treatments for breast cancer, serum tumor markers, complications of cancer, including thromboembolism and treatment-related cognitive dysfunction. I have no idea what that is, but the fact that it's on here and it's tough to pronounce, that sounds like a big doggone deal. How long have you all, Dr. May, Gary May, president of UC Davis, is an engineer. Mm-hmm. He married an engineer, and I joke that conversations around the table are either very scintillating or very boring. There's not a whole lot in between. So now I have a pair of doctors. Mm-hmm. Conversations around the dinner table have to be very scintillating or very boring. What are they?
I think they're still scintillating.
Oh, okay.
No, I agree, and I think that
Great answer.
Well, I was just gonna say, Pastor Meeks, that I think one of the reasons I went into medicine, I was actually an engineering student. You'll be,
I'm so sorry.
Interested to hear when I met the future Dr. Chew here, and she inspired me actually to rethink what I was doing at the time. So I was studying electrical engineering at the time we met.
Wow.
So, anyway.
I'm a civil. My brother's in electrical. Yeah. What school did you meet at?
We met at Stanford.
Oh, Stanford. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, I was a Sac State grad, so sting her up. So that is incredible. As I was reading your profiles, one of the things that I saw under Dr. Chew's, they list comments, and I'm assuming, you see patients on a regular.
I do.
And one that stood out, I mean, it goes on, and it's like 4.9 out of 5 stars. It's incredible. I didn't see, Dr. Henderson, I didn't see a similar.
It's true. I'm the baggage in the family.
Okay.
In some regards.
You're bringing the family down, is what you're saying? Okay. Dr. Chew, so this is dated February 17th, 2022, so it's very recent, very recent. Dr. Chew is excellent. She is caring, compassionate, and very knowledgeable. More importantly, she listens. And listen is in all caps, followed by at least 5 exclamation marks. I'm not a doctor. I've had the need to be with doctors. And even though, Dr. Henderson, you didn't have a similar public Yelp review, if you will, I can say for a fact that I've read and I know you all are very good listeners. That's not always the case with doctors. My experience has been you walk into an office, you walk into space. I've already read your chart. I know the problem. Here's a prescription. I've got 50 other people to deal with right after you. Have a nice day. But you haven't heard me. What has made you different, or the exception? And I do say that. I think you are the exception.
Well, I think, Mark, what I could say is I think the field that I'm in, which is cancer or oncology, it's really important to forge a relationship with the patient. I think it's a very vulnerable time in their lives, and I think they have to feel some trust. So a lot of times it's just listening, and I think we've been doing this a long time. I think over the years I have definitely gotten better about that. It's my clinic day, maybe a really long day, longer than I think I may be running behind. But with time, I've learned that patients actually appreciate that. Even if I'm running late, I come into the next room and I say, I'm sorry for making you wait. And they'll say, oh no, I understand. If somebody needs you to be there with them, I understand that, or to take care of things. So I think in my field, it's actually, over time, I've just really learned to set aside that time. I think also with the advent of technology, so we have a computer in front of us now, right? And a lot of the charting is on computer. So I think there's a tendency to be very efficient and to not even look at the patient and just be typing away while you're listening to them. And I think that's such a disconnect, I think, especially when you're trying to, just forge a relationship or really hear about what's going on. And I think with what I do, there are some really bad days and there's some really good days in terms of how
normal.
they feel.
You're human is what you're saying. Okay.
Well, I think it really does help. But I have taught myself and reminded myself with time to just slow down. So one of the first things I try to do is I hardly say anything. I'll just say, how are you? And just let it go. I don't interrupt until they're ready to just stop. And sometimes it's uncomfortable if they're emotional, but I think even being comfortable in the silence and allowing them to go on can be helpful. So.
I think by definition, or just by dint of your vocation, I don't think you see anybody just because that your patient load comes to you because there's something that needs to be dealt with. So there are no downtimes, if you will.
Sometimes when I've seen a patient for a long time and it's a check-in and they've been on medication, but they've been on it for a long time and they can be very stable. So I do want to say sometimes it really is nice. It does feel like a check-in, and it's good to hear that everything is going well. And I have to admit, one of the things that I love about medicine and knowing people over time is, honestly, some visits sometimes feel like just social visits. I've taken care of them for a long time. Their cancer is taken care of, and in the past, they may still be on medications, but it's just checking in, and it's about asking about their family or what else is going on, or their grandchildren or their travels. And so I think it's a nice blend. Some days maybe they're more of the urgent or patients not doing well visits, and sometimes it's a nice blend of both.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Henderson, I guess you see patients, but your focus tends to be on the school and the preparation of getting folks to move into that space.
Mm-hmm. No, it's. I think let me say first that Dr. Chew's very humble in terms of her sort of what she does and how she does it, because it is really what she described is so critical. That first minute or that first 2 minutes you encounter someone who's ill or in pain, and so something I do teach and something that's been studied is actually physicians and how often and how early they interrupt their patients in a visit. So a study was done about 15 years ago that looked at a bunch of different encounters between physicians and their patients and found that on average, there was an interval of about 18 and a half seconds before the physician first interrupted the patient.
Wow.
So I think about that. I mean, you almost can't get your first sentence out or your first thought out as the patient. So I think what she described is just, is sort of a cardinal rule in medicine, and that is you may ask a simple opening question, tell me why you're here today, how can I help you? But then your job as the physician really is just to zip your mouth shut and wait for a minute and listen, or 2 minutes. And I think, as she said, most of the time, that silence, you being silent as the physician, is golden in a way, because you really discover what's important for that individual. And I think oftentimes you discover the diagnosis. I think for me, every mistake I've ever made, and there are many in medicine, has to do with not, closing my mind or maybe not listening enough to what the patient was saying.
What we tend to call listening, I think, is our human. We're just waiting for the other person to shut up so we can go ahead and say what we want to say. Mm-hmm. And we call it listening. But to be actively engaged, the other pressure that you all face is there are a lot of folks queued up that need you. We haven't even gotten into, and just for our audience sake once more, if I was neglecting mentioning, Doctors Henderson and Chew are married. They are married. So again, the conversations around the table are got to be interesting. They haven't even gotten to the personal side. This is all vocational, and it cannot help but bleed over to get into those spaces. Real quick word association, then, if I can. One word, rapid fire. Describe each other's, not Helen, my wife, or Mark, my husband, but a word you would describe each other as physicians. Dr. Chew.
Calm.
Determined.
Good listener.
That's 2 words.
Kind.
Wow. I need to switch over from my current medical program and get under your administration. You do general medicine. Interesting. So now, let me just switch real quick. As husband and wife, as your wife, one word.
Loyal?
That was the word I was going to use for him.
You can use it too.
Yeah.
All
Loyal.
right. Now it's kind of like, now you got to use another word.
Steadfast.
Funny.
I like that. Those are good. Those are good. Those are helpful, both vocationally and both personally. Dr. Henderson, we had the occasion to meet through the UC Davis partnership with City Church to do COVID-19 vaccinations. And that was it about September of last year? Ish?
Summer, fall. Yeah.
Yeah, it was after we had done the initial onslaught, if you will, of vaccination. And then there was part 2. And that's how we met, and we crossed paths. Little did I know that December 12th of last year, I would lose my daughter. Yeah. She she passed of a drug overdose, fentanyl mostly, after years of struggling, And in our conversation, UC Davis, and this is not an ad for UC Davis, but the relationships that we had formed proved to be very beneficial on a personal level, because the clinicians, the administrators, the love that was unexpected, but just came in waves. We heard about what can we do. That meant a whole lot. And so from that point, we've had many conversations. And then come to find out that you all lost your youngest son. Suddenly, tragically. How many years ago?
10
years ago.
10 years.
He was how old?
He was 7.
7.
Yeah, so his birthday is coming up. It's on Monday, so he would be 18 this next Monday.
Wow. I don't have to, one thing my daughter's, and your son's name?
John.
John. One thing I don't have to ask you, is people say, how you doing? How is it going? It's like, we know.
Yeah.
We know. It's been 10 years ago.
And in many ways, the 10 years have gone by slowly, and they've gone by quickly. And I guess let me first say, I am very sorry about your daughter, Mark, and I know how hard it is to, even it's hard for us to talk about it 10 years later, but for you to bring that up now when this just happened to Sarah is very courageous. So I just want to acknowledge that. And again, we're very sorry for your loss.
Thank you. There's there's this book here. It's called Morning Song by Joyce Landorf Heatherly. I have not completely read it. I have to take things in bites. But one of the things that she said, I did find a set of notes I had written one night after attending a funeral. Apparently, I'd been overwhelmed by anger. These are my raw thoughts as I wrote them, and I won't read them all, but the first paragraph really struck me. He said, everything about the mortuary in my town is carefully geared to comfort the grieving families and friends of the deceased. And then she posits a question: why doesn't it work on me? You've been in the space of both the provider of words of comfort and healing, and also in need of words of comfort and healing. Unpack that, describe that journey, if you will. Your clinicians, I stand in the role of a pastor. I'm sure there's a lot of intersection, but this conversation is more about you than me, so.
I think that when we lost John, it was, for me, a feeling of incredible vulnerability that I don't think I'd felt personally before. And even though I have been a cancer doctor for a long time and have had difficult conversations with patients about how the course is going, maybe not going well, patients are dying, talking to the family, I think I just was unprepared with how vulnerable I felt. I'm sure your world has just completely fallen apart. That's how I felt. And I think sometimes people said some really comforting things, but when I look back in all these years, the thing that was comforting to me was just their presence, people showing up. They didn't have to say anything really spectacular or anything that I had to write down as an epiphany. It was just really showing up and being there. And I think acknowledging how terrible it was. And not everybody can do that. I think it makes people feel very uncomfortable to talk about tragedy, especially an unexpected tragedy, death of a child, something that's sudden. But, I've talked to Mark over the years about this. The group of people, we have very good friends that have shown up, but the other group of people that were just so reliable, not every single one, but as a group were my patients when I actually went back to work. I think they just felt very comfortable acknowledging, the grief, the loss, all the things that some people might not be comfortable with. I think maybe in some ways their journey, how they felt vulnerable, how they felt out of control, and I would use that term. I felt like I had no control. I had no way, I didn't know where this boat was drifting, and I had no way of controlling it. So I think, it was probably really hard for me to be of comfort, I think, the first few months I was back as a physician. But I was very inspired by how touching many people were. And they were there with me. They were the patient, and I was there crying, and they were comforting me in that appointment. So I think with time, it's just been, some people know, some people don't, because this happened 10 years ago. But I think it's allowed me in many ways to not just understand the disease and what's going on, but I think that feeling of being out of control, that feeling of being very, very vulnerable. One day you're just living your life, and the next day someone tells you have cancer and you need to do these steps. You need to have surgery, you have to have chemotherapy, you have to do this, you have to do that. And I think there's this whole feeling of loss of control and fear, of course, of the unknown.
I'm getting the image of and I've used the analogy before of putting a Band-Aid over a cancerous wound. The Band-Aid may keep the wound from bleeding, but it does nothing for the cancer. And I think a lot of times ripping that Band-Aid off and exposing what is good. I mean, I don't think it's bad at all, but it is definitely a conversation killer for a lot of folks. It's like you bring this up, oh, how are you doing? You really don't want to know.
Right.
You really don't want to know.
Right.
So it becomes more of a salutation, a thing that folks say, good morning. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean? Mark, we've had some very I don't say raw conversations, just very transparent conversations. I want to piggyback on your BFF.
Yeah, I think, what you said about comfort and what you and I have talked about is that the feeling you have after you suddenly lose someone that you were so close to, loved so deeply, felt responsible for, we're supposed to take care of, which is what we all feel as parents. When you lose something like that, it's such a lonely place to be. You feel so lonely and so isolated from the rest of the world. I think and so comfort in a situation like that, I'm not sure words, I think this is what Helen said, I'm not even sure they matter. There are no words, right, that could actually provide comfort. So I think it ends up being people in the community, and like Helen said, those who showed up for us, and maybe those showed up for each of us, you, me, each of us finding each other is community. That's what community is about. And you find it in different and surprising places, as you described how you and I met. So I do feel like what people think is comfort, maybe what they think they are trying to do to be comforting, is often not so much as we all know here.
That's an understatement. Biblically, as I was sharing, I don't know if I shared with you, Doctor, Job's friends were fine until they opened their mouth. It's like you were doing okay, then you talk.
Yeah.
And if you would have just shut up, you'd have been okay.
I think that's happened, I think, Helen, a number of times that we've discussed, yes. For some reason, it seemed like I got less of those comments. I think in part because Helen, she sees a lot more patients than I do, is a lot busier. But yeah, there were many, I think, of those. I think you'd wished they hadn't said anything.
Well, and I think they're really trying. Maybe they think they're saying something that's going to help you. But I think things like it was meant, it was meant to be, or,
wow.
Someone said, this is such a crazy world, he's better off not here, right? And I think, I don't think they meant it in any malicious way, but I remember thinking, wow, I don't feel that way at all. I wish, if anything, he was still here,
Absolutely.
right?
And if we were to flip that same sentiment 180 degrees, it's like, oh, no. I really don't mean that. Oh,
Right.
you just said that.
Yes,
It's
And maybe that's why some people don't say anything. Maybe they feel like they don't know what to say, or they might say the wrong thing, or they might make you cry, or they'll try to say, I'm sorry I brought it up. I didn't mean to, make you cry. And, we would just tell people, we think about John all the time, same as I'm sure you think about your daughter all the time, right? It's always there.
It's always there.
Yeah.
There's never not, I don't say a minute, but
Yeah.
an hour.
Yeah.
Of course.
Always. I'm not wearing my watch now, but I have one of those little Apple Watches with saved pictures. And, depending on the flick of the wrist, her image will pop up.
Yeah.
Martha Hickman, there's a theme here. Martha Hickman and Joyce Landorf Heatherly, finding two books that are helpful, that are written by women. There might be a theme here, Dr. Chew. The book is titled Healing After Loss. Subtitle is Daily Meditations for Working Through Grief. Working Through Grief. And it didn't hit me until today. Really, it didn't hit me until today that working seems to be an apt word to use as it applies to the loss of someone that's close, or as I've shared with City Church and others, I've had the opportunity to help bury my parents. I've helped buried two brothers, but the loss of a daughter, it's like, it can't be compared. It's just like, no, there's loss, and then there's loss. So I guess working seems to be a good word. How have you, 10 years, and as you said, it seems so long ago, but it seems like just like yesterday. How does working fit as a descriptor? Is that fair? That's not my word. That's her subtitle. But what's that process been like for you?
Oh, it's work. I think that's a very apt term. I also think it's a little bit like swimming in an ocean against the current. I also think it's a little bit like walking through mud. It's so the work, I do think it's been a process where, if by work you mean that sort of thing that you endeavor to do and you strive to do each day, and sometimes you don't see much improvement, you don't feel much better, but you keep going, you keep putting one foot in front of the other, to coin a phrase, but it really is like that. Sometimes you're just trying to get to the next step forward. So it's slow work, I guess. I'd qualify it.
Has this work, I mean, obviously it's impacted your vocation. It can't help. It's impacted you as a person, as a husband, as a man, as a father of still two children.
Yeah.
Has this work, how has this work changed Dr. Mark Henderson?
I think, it's the one thing that, I mean, there are probably many ways, but the one thing that I think is maybe a little bit like what Helen was speaking about earlier about her patients, comforting her. Patients with cancer live their lives very differently because they've faced death in a very real way. And for me, the way I feel like I'm different is that I'm not going to wait any longer to live my, if you will, dreams or to live my life. It's going to start now. And what I mean by that is in so many ways, like being a better husband, being a better father to my other two kids, and doing things that maybe I would aspire to do or have on a bucket list or something like that, but where work got in the way of those things before. I think now I try not to let those things get in the way of living life because it's so precious, right? And I also buried my brother way too early, when we're in our 30s. And as you said, I mean, it's nothing. It doesn't even compare to losing your son or your daughter. So I don't think it changed me in the same way as this did. So yeah, I would say that's one thing. I just enjoying life and seeing life, appreciating life. In a way, it's grateful. It's being grateful for life.
This is hard for me to.
I think it's hard to be grateful when you're in a place like where you are. And I think,
and that's what I was going to say, is that I am grateful to my daughter
yes,
to have opened my eyes.
yes. That's what it is, Pastor Mark. That's John, gave me a great gift. I would take it back in a second.
Absolutely.
I just don't. I think. I guess the gratefulness is just that we still have things to be grateful for, and I'm just grateful that we got to spend time with him. And it's hard to see that. I know Helen and I, we were talking, you were telling me the other day about that last time you rode with him on a chairlift, and how, you just thought about that in a very different way than you had before, or maybe.
I'm not sure. I know exactly what you mean, but we brought it up. So John fell off a chairlift when he was with a team, and I'd happened to just ride up with him. Very coincidentally, he spotted me in a line and broke away from his team, and we rode up. And this was probably 30 or 40 minutes before he actually had fallen. And I wasn't with him when that happened. He was with his teammates, and we just had a great ride up, and it was just chatting about how beautiful everything was and how lucky we were to do this. That was really much the last conversation I had with him. And he got off, I got off, and he went and met up with his team. And I was riding with some friends, and then 30 or 40 minutes later, I got a call, and so that was really the last conversation we had. I'm not sure if I'm missing what you were saying, but I think about that sometimes as, now I remember, as I can't help but thinking it's something now, and I couldn't think of it this way 9 or 10 years ago. But now when I think about it, it feels almost like an intervention, a divine, how come I would have seen him right at that time? So normally I'd drop him off in the morning with a group. They ski as a team, then I pick him up, have lunch, and that particular weekend it wasn't a lot of snow and they were only doing half days. But I normally would not have seen him at all. He just picked me out, joined us, and I had a chance to just have this wonderful write-up with him and say to him, aren't we lucky that we even get to do this, you know? And that's the first time I looked at it that way. But I can tell you, I don't think even the first year after that I would have ever looked at it that way. It was just too painful.
Doesn't sound like or maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth, that the pain has attenuated, abated much in 10 years. It's still like right there. Would you?
Yeah, I think there's a hole, there's a void in your heart, I think, when you lose a child. And I think it's just hard to fill. I think with time and some distance, we're able to function. You know, we both took some time off work. I just didn't feel I could even function or be there for my patients. So I feel like that's better, or maybe I can sometimes compartmentalize a little bit better. But I think when I think about it, it's still very hard. I think it still is I think it's just a void that we will live with.
Yeah. I've likened the passing of my daughter, and it doesn't even begin to compare, but to an amputation of a major limb. Doesn't result in my death, I pray, but it is major trauma. And you have to now adjust to the loss of that limb that you so you valued, but you underappreciated.
Yeah, I think the metaphor of an amputation is an apt one, Mark. Or I think I would add to that you've lost your arm or leg, but it's not apparent to anyone else. So someone who truly has an amputation at least is acknowledged by the outside world in some way, because
Correct.
You can't help but see they don't have their left arm. Whereas I think when you have this kind of loss, it's not obvious, it's not visible to people, which is, I think, what can make this journey so lonely in some ways, because it's not written on your face, right? But yet it perfuses every fiber of your being, right? So anyway.
You obviously stand in a unique space. I guess pastors you're supposed to do this. You know, you deal with, doctors, I guess, but on a personal level where you're experiencing the loss of a child, loss of someone very close, you stand in a somewhat unique space. Have you had the opportunity to share this conversation outside of this space here, more broadly with other physicians? I can't help but believe that this conversation would be so helpful to those pastors and doctors alike. As best you can, others, if best you can understand or appreciate what we're trying to convey to you without you experiencing this, you need to understand the trauma that this is, and not just do perfunctory, rote behavior. So I've shared with those close to me. I said, don't give me trite recitation of Scripture. I know the Word as well or better than you. And so, as I said with Job's friends, they were good until they opened their mouth.
What I was going to say is I think Mark has been really, in his role as an educator, he's been very good about, I think, sharing this with many generations, actually, of students. And I think bringing up how to speak to people, how to have empathy, how to have compassion, really without having them go through something like that, right? To still be able to bring it up, and I think allow yourself to be in an uncomfortable space with someone because of their loss or their grief. So I think that's something I was thinking of when you were bringing that up. But I think as far as really having a conversation about grief or speaking about it in our culture, I don't know that we've done anything else systematically.
Yeah, I think one of the things we've done is that other podcast with our colleague. One of our colleagues is very, I don't know how you describe him, but just a very good listener, maybe. I don't know. And someone that has been with us, was one of those people Helen alluded to after John died, who was present for us in so many ways, showing love just and presence, which I think is that part of, again, it's love, it's showing up for people. So he was there for us, and so he makes medical podcasts, and so he wanted us to be on a podcast about surviving, if you will,
Resilience, yeah.
crisis or
Resilience.
and surviving crisis in the time. And I think it had become relevant with COVID, of course. A lot of physicians had gone through their own personal illness with COVID, acquiring the illness or seeing the suffering and the ravaging of people with that illness. So yeah, we did a podcast with him. I think that's the closest thing to, and then I've written about it a little bit. I think I think that's maybe helped others. I think that has helped others. At least give them a window into what it's like.
You're not planning on retiring anytime soon, I hope. You've got so much to, you probably want to retire yesterday, but you have so much to offer in the space you're in. Not that you can't do more or greater in others, but where you're at right now just seems so timely, particularly as you mentioned, coming out of COVID, hitting the 1 million marker. What a milestone. Mm-hmm. 1 million folks just in our country that have lost their lives to a virus. And it's interesting, ironic, that whereas before on the news, I would see, so-and-so passed away, age such and such. It would be almost like the Charlie Brown's teacher. It's like, wah, 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 wah. Now I hear it, and I really hear it. And I think about the grief and the trauma that each person, think about the senseless shooting in Buffalo just recently. 10 people, at least 10 families, just ripped up because of an act of just absolute hatred. Doesn't make it any easier. Grief is grief, death is death. And when it's in this way, it's difficult. I guess that's a very long-winded way of hoping that you guys will continue to do what you do in the way that you do it to those that desperately need you, particularly those facing breast cancer. Just my mother passed away as a result of breast cancer.
So sorry.
Yeah. I mean, it's.
And I think the work of what Helen does, like as you just said, it's so common, and now COVID is so common. These things are the work we do is important. I think something else, and like what you do, it's the work that we do. We're very fortunate to be in a profession that can make a difference in people's lives immediately, but also, since we work at a teaching institution, it can make a difference in the lives of future physicians and future healthcare providers. And so I guess, yeah.
Do you see that? I'm running out of time now, but are you feeling that empathy in the students that you're encountering? Do you see them open to hearing what you're sharing?
It's a really interesting question, Mark. I think that this is a little bit like what Helen said earlier about her patients. I feel like the students that come from backgrounds or from places where they've personally experienced tragedy, or maybe they grow up in an impoverished neighborhood, or maybe they haven't had all the advantages, I do think they are much more open to a story like this because they've had experiences like that in their own families, and so I think it depends, but I would say generally at our institution we tend to, and I think we look at candidates we like them to have what I'll call lived experience and personal experience so that they can relate to their patients. And I've had some incredibly sort of empathetic and courageous students come forward to just, again, not to say the perfect words, but just to acknowledge the loss and try to be present in some way. And that's what we do in medicine. Is just we try to relieve a little bit of the pain an individual's having. And so I would say yes in general. I don't know. Helen has been in charge of cancer. People who are training to be oncologists, and I don't know.
Yeah, I think I think there's just a special group of people who want to do that. I just spoke to a group of pre-medical students at the UC Davis campus last Sunday, and someone asked just about what I could say about this field, the good things and the bad things. And I made a comment that I've heard years ago that the field kind of chooses you. Not everybody wants to do cancer. Not everybody wants to be a neurosurgeon. Not everybody, it's sort of it selects out the people that want to do it. It is like a calling. And I remember, and I shared it with them, that when I decided to do that, a lot of my co-trainees or residents said, "Oh, that's so sad. Why would you want to do that?" But then I think the people who want to do it don't think of it that way. They think of it as very fulfilling. So I think people who want to take care of patients like that are a little bit different from people who don't. But you still have people who might be focused more on one thing or the other, or may have just a different style. But I think that as long as we as a society keep talking about that importance of communication, of empathy, of listening to patients, and I think that's, to me, is very different than it was when we trained so many years, so many decades ago. It was all about the knowledge and the science. And being smart enough to know everything. And you still have to be smart, of course. You have to take care of the patients. But as you described in some of the experiences, we really need people who can listen. Because one of the worst things we can do is get caught up in I know what's wrong, and I've interrupted you after 18 seconds, and I know, and here it is, and I'll see you later. Because that you can really get caught up, and you can be very wrong. So I think that as a society, I think we're better at it, but we have to keep that conversation going, and especially teaching all the trainees and the students.
Well, Dr. Helen Chew, Dr. Mark Henderson, I so appreciate you both. I appreciate you being open, vulnerable, listening to me, and also sharing your story with myself and the audience. I try and extract, hopefully you won't break my streak, a promise that you'll be open to coming back into this space and having a follow-up conversation.
Of course.
Of course, Mark.
Thank you for having us.
Oh,
It's an honor.
it is indeed an honor. Thank you so very much, and we look forward to the next time.